another edition of the Michigan Lacrosse Review. My name is Greg Norman, your host. Well, we're smack dab right in the middle of the 24 men's lacrosse season, and we're going to spend some time talking about a recent announcement from the MHSAA and a little bit about the referee strike. John Losey joins us for the first portion of the show, and we're going to mention and talk a little bit about the Michigan High School Athletic Association's announcements of hosting this year's 2024 Spring State Finals at the University of Michigan's Lacrosse Stadium, one of the best facilities in the Midwest. It's a great announcement, and it sort of solidifies the sport under one roof because now the girls get to play on Friday and the young men get to play on Saturday. When you play basketball in Breslin, you certainly play football in Ford Field, and some other sports are involved in college campuses. This is a great announcement. I think John and I will spend some time talking about that. We'll also briefly touch on the referee strike or lack of strike or walkout, whatever you want to call it, but we're going to touch a little bit on that. Then we get a chance to spend a couple of seconds talking to who was one of the nicest coaches you'll ever want to meet, and that's Andrew Whitley, who was the head coach at Bellarmine University. And we're talking to him about University of Detroit Mercy heading down to Louisville, Kentucky this coming Saturday. And we thought we'd spend some time talking to him because we've heard what a great guy he is. And I think if you spend some time watching the interview, you'll appreciate just exactly what a cool guy he is. And he does have currently a couple of players on the roster from Southeastern Michigan, and there'll be some more adding to that roster here in the next year when graduates of 2024 and 2025. We had that opportunity. Before we get to that, we wanted to kind of have some fun. When we started having a conversation with Andrew, we're going to play you a little bit of a blooper on the front end of the interview with him. We always think of guys with golden tongues, and I'm certainly not one of them. So we thought we'd have a good laugh, and maybe at my expense, and hopefully it'll be enjoyable to watch. And if not, maybe you get a good laugh out of it. But we're going to show you some bloopers from the Andrew Whitley conversation, and then we'll jump in to have a conversation with John Losey. So we'll be back in just a second. Welcome back to Titan Review. We're talking with Andy Whitfield, who's the head coach at Bellarmine. University of Detroit Mercy will be on the road this coming Saturday, all the way down in that great city in Kentucky, playing what is probably right now one of the best teams in the country that some people know about. Obviously, you had 11 wins last year, Andy, but you have a great program this year. You just had a win this week over God, now I've lost my brain again. 14.
Robert Morris in Cleveland State.
All right, let me start this over. Sorry about this. 5.
All right.
Welcome back to Titan Review. Talking with Andy Whitfield, the head coach at Bellarmine. University of Detroit Mercy heads down to Kentucky.
I don't mean to start you over again. It's Whitley.
What did I say?
Whitfield.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. 5-4. Welcome back to Michigan. God. All right, here it goes. Welcome back to Michigan. I just finished out. Welcome back to Titan Preview. And it's not Titan Preview, it's Titan Review. 5-4. Welcome back to Titan Review. We're talking with Andy. Welcome back to Other Voices. Get a chance to talk with my broadcast partner, John Losey. My name is Greg Norman, your host here at Michigan Lacrosse Review. We haven't talked, John, in about 10 or 12 days. We had a chance to kind of weigh in on the MHSAA referee strike. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're certainly going to talk about the University of Michigan kind of finally opening the doors to host what will be, I think, a very exciting lacrosse, both men's and women's final coming up in the second week of June. So I think those are big notes. And so let's start with that one. And I think you broke the story, if I'm not mistaken, through some information that came out, and it was posted the next day. So thoughts on playing at the University of Michigan?
No, it was, and it was interesting, when I put out the post, I got a number of calls. I mean, I even got a call from Andy Asimo, who's the head coach at Dublin Jerome down in Ohio, defending state champ. And he called me and said, congrats. It's just been a long time coming, right? I mean, it's where it should be. And I've had some complaints from folks about, well, it should be closer to the West Side. And I'm like, it's going to be anywhere. It's got to be at the University of Michigan, right? I mean, it's the most central. I mean, it's the only iconic, type, dedicated lacrosse field that we have. And over the year, I mean, and here's the interesting thing, Greg. I mean, yes, the venue is great, and it's everything that we always asked for the years, but the bigger part that kind of goes unnoticed is the fact of being able to put the boys and the girls together at one location and split up by the days. And so this will be the first time for me personally, since I've been as engaged with lacrosse, that I'm going to be able to watch all four state finals, boys boys one, boys two, and girls one and girls two. So it's just a win for everybody. It's for the kids. And I couldn't be more happy.
The geography question about where we play, if you take and go all the way to almost would be the western end of the UP, you go to Iron River, Iron Mountain, not far from Duluth, and you come all the way down to, I don't know, LaSalle, which is certainly the southeastern as you're getting down to the other end. The equivalent distance is driving to Atlanta, Georgia, in terms of distance, right?
Right.
So the guys that are in the western UP have to come to the Lions facility, obviously, Ford Field, which is at best a 400 or 500-mile ride, but they're playing in a stadium. You could make an argument you could certainly play at Northern Michigan and play in a dome, but they come down. Basketball teams from all over the state go to Breslin.
Yep.
Baseball teams go to Central.
Mm-hmm.
When is it not iconic for a high school kid to hold an event on a college campus as compared to maybe a professional facility?
Right.
So Cole Malatinsky and Mark Ewell and all the guys at MHSA should be, sort of patted on the back. We've been playing in a junior high school facility. East Grand Rapids was great last year, and they have a wonderful facility. You can make an argument for Grand Blanc. They have a brand new facility that's second to none.
Yep.
But now we got a home, and we switch it every day. Every year they go back to switching it. So this year the girls are going to play on Friday back to back.
Yep.
The boys will play obviously on Saturday midday, and the rest of it. And now we've got a home. Let's hope we can call it home for good. So we're going to try and have a conversation tomorrow with Cole. I'm not sure he'll have, if he's got any time, but I think they should be patted on the back for a great opportunity.
I agree. And I've been a big proponent for this for years. I mean, I've got that, and I'm actually redoing it right now. I created this picture of all the, I created football and Ford Field and the history behind it, and down the line with all the other iconic places. And then I put in obviously, Parker Middle School out in Howell. And this was never a knock on this, Howell or the facility or the volunteers, because that was a big thing. And they ran they did the best they could with that event. It's not a bad facility. It's just not what you want to set your goals for at the beginning of a season to get to. And that was the whole piece. And so, it's where it should be. I can't wait. And I'll probably be getting a room up there.
Well, in the follow-up to it, and again, I'll go back. I use skiing as an example because it's something I've been involved with for a long time. The state made a decision when they started ski racing 56 years ago. About 5 years in, they made a decision that they needed to go to Marquette, because Marquette Mountain is right in town. Northern Michigan is there. 80% of ski racing is in southeastern Michigan, where there are 4 ski hills. We've never contested a race in Detroit, and I know for a fact when I was part of the Ski Coaches Association, I actually did a whole scientific thing on how there was the urban legends that there's no snow. The only difference between up north and the 10 years we studied was there was 1 year there was, marginal snow, but you could certainly move the championship, as you knew that there was going to be snow bad the week before moving up north. But every 4 years we go to Marquette. Now, being a Cussa guy, which is essentially travel, if you will, I have no problem. When I first did the story, I wasn't involved in Cussa. Well, yes, the hills are up north are better, but 80% of your client base is skiing on what essentially is Mount Holly and Pine Knob. You'd think that they would want to make that decision once every 5 years to come down here. Because in 56 years or 57 years of high school racing, not one kid from the southeastern Michigan has ever spent a night in his own bed the night before a race. That's not true of anybody up north. That's certainly not true of the UP. So sometimes they can be short-sighted, they being the MHSAA, but obviously they made some good choices. So
and they get credit here. They got it done. And I was, all over them by the fact that we didn't have a venue announced, and we were already, 3 weeks into the season with no destination for the boys or the girls. And I joked in one of my posts, I said, maybe they're just haven't posted it yet because they're working on something big, laugh out loud. And in reality, that's what it was. And so the joke's on me, and they do deserve to be commended because I know it's not a cheap expense. I know I've helped put together games there just last weekend with Brother Rice and St. Xavier out of Cincinnati. And so I know there's a cost to it. And so, we're gonna need to pack it and sell some tickets, and I'll be promoting the heck out of it. And hopefully it'll be, it's gonna be a win for everybody.
I also think that there's going to be some movement within that same discussion about the Hall of Fame for the Michigan High
Yeah,
School
you mentioned that.
Coaches Association. John, I think it's a great opportunity, but now 2.5 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, probably something in that neighborhood, we were talking about the possibility of not having a season because we were having, and I won't use the word strike, but certainly a sit down. I'll use a 60s term because you apparently you can't strike if you don't belong to an organization as a member, but yet you're a member because you have to pay dues. So there's a whole independent contractor discussion in the semantics.
Yep.
I'll leave my law degree back in the toilet because it doesn't have any part to this. But we were talking about not having any games. We went away for Easter, and lo and behold, poof, it didn't seem like there was an issue. And I've been watching the NPR. I've been watching the various conversations. You and I had talked about this 2 weeks ago, and I must have had 15 or 20 conversations with a variety of people before the break, before spring break. Haven't had one since, and I don't know that we've missed any games. So whatever happened, and I have a pretty good idea that guys that wanted to work, when it came down to guys wanted to work, it was going to be what it is. So your take on some things.
Yeah, I think you summed it up pretty well. And I didn't, there was no movement or no conversations from, all the people that I had been talking to are like, well, there's no movement, there's no movement, there's no movement. And really what I understand it to be is that you've got, more of the tenured or the seasoned officials that were steadfast in their decision to not do games. But they left it open for anybody else that wanted to do games. And I think that's kind of where we sit at this point, where you've got a number of members that are like, I just want to ref, right? This isn't my cause. And the juice wasn't worth the squeeze for them to stand up for something that they just wanted to work and officiate. And so I think that's what it seems to me at this point, where you still got a handful of the season reps that are like, you know what, we're not doing it for under $100. And then everyone else is doing it for what the normal price of 75.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the urban legends that got thrown out by both sides of the parties that were negotiating, I think a lot of that had changed, and I think a lot of it made sense. We had a chance a couple of executive board members from the MHSA executive board. Part of that discussion is that next year the state is trying to figure out a way to get everybody sort of under the same umbrella so that officials in all sports make an equitable number.
Yeah.
And part of that discussion is, let's just take any school that's got somewhere between 24 and 32 sports. Well, if you look at the numbers of that increases of where they're headed,
A lot of money.
you're talking, on the low end, 30, 35,000 is maybe as high as 40 or 45,000. That's a small number in a small school or in a medium-sized school's budget. And since they set them ahead of time, it's one of those conversations that you can't pull it out of the air.
Right.
If you're lucky enough to have a public school, as most public school teams now are, any ancillary dollars for a public school are driven outside the school. School gives you a coaching salary, they give you the field, they give you buses, they pay for referees. Anything else is the coaches. I think 30 years ago, as in coaching, I didn't have to become an accountant and a fundraiser, and a dishwasher and all the things that go with it. But that's the nature of the beast now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a tough place to be.
Yeah. I mean, and I didn't, even when I got involved originally, I was looking at it in a vacuum of just lacrosse officials and just this sport that I'm obviously passionate about. And then I think you mentioned to me about, the increase coming next year and what that would do for the larger schools with 32 sports. You do the math, and now you're looking at some pretty big dollars. And I think that, even talking to some of the ADs, they're like, listen, if we give into this, where does it end? And I think they were taking it too far, like you said, the urban legend, a lot of the conversations. But there is a tangible point to that at some point when this does go into effect with some continuity across the board, that there's hard dollars here for districts that that don't have the money to be able to do it.
Well, I think both sides represented their causes in a good way. But I found when you're representing something in that, sort of this vernacular, sometimes I'm not going to say the truth gets stretched, but certainly your talking points sound better than maybe what they really are.
Yeah.
So I have a suggestion, and I think this is a good one. We've been back playing. I've seen some of the same officials now 2 and 3 games in a row. Now it's not done on geography, but if I'm the guy paying $100 and there's about 5 or 6 or 7 of us in this area that are doing that, they're jumping on those games because they're getting $10 more than they might have otherwise gotten.
Right.
But the equity of other sports, and I'll use football as an example because I did a lot of years of football and a lot of years of basketball. I would work the Catholic League once in a while. I would work the OAA. I would work the Detroit Public School League. And it was sort of based on your rating. Now, every referee has a rating, right? Just as schools do, just as teams do. That's why we have an NPR. We made the suggestion, and again, in a regional format, because everything is represented by those regional referee associations. There's the Grand Rapids Association, Lansing, Saginaw Flint, obviously Detroit with Mishloa. 50% of the games for a guy who's rated high, divided into 3, right? So 50% of the games, if you're at whatever the level, you're a 1.2 and up, you work 50% of your games against those schools. Then you work 25% against the middle and 25% against the rated bottom teams. And that's a fair thing. The guys at the bottom work 50% if you're a third level official, 25% of the time. So my point to it is that you get to see, as a high school, you get to see the Bob Boweries, the Dana Friends, the Brian Effingers. You get to see the guys that are the best at the sport. They're making the same amount of money. I'm not suggesting that that those guys have to drive to Grand Rapids, but in the regional area, what happens is they put out the games and everybody gets to just sign up to what makes sense. What coach wants to see the same official 5 times?
Right.
And it's not because of what we're going to do. I might have no problem for 5 games and all of a sudden there's an issue. It makes it uncomfortable for the official. As an official, I never wanted to work in the same place twice.
Right. Yeah.
And I might have gotten in some Donnybrook because the coach decided he didn't like a call that I'd made. Now I got to go back to the same school.
Yeah. Right.
That's
The
the
next
whole
game.
point of
3 days later.
Well, yeah, but the argument of it takes a little more work to do it from the assigning standpoint. But you're a Rice guy and that's cool. You don't deserve the best officials every game. I'm not saying you don't deserve good officials, but there should be some opportunities because here's what happens. The guys at the bottom really see what good officiating looks like.
Right.
And you're not getting stuck every game in the same grouping, right?
Right.
And I think they do a good job of trying to bring, veterans together with new guys. And I think Carl and Brunswick, who's the assigner for Mishlow, I think they try to do a really good job with that.
I do too.
But they get a little more structure to how they get their games and where they get their games. And again, we did this for 30 years in both football, basketball, baseball, everything else. I know that Vic Michaels does it in the Catholic League. I certainly know that everybody wants the best officials, but if we're equitable about it, doesn't everybody win at some point?
Yeah. I mean, it's communication, it's structure, it's taking the initiative to do something, to make it better. I agree. And yeah, I mean, everybody knows I've done the schedule for Rice for 10 years. And so, I will let them know, hey, listen, I've got, the defending state champ in Ohio coming in, Dublin Jerome, to play Rice. It's going to be a big game and they're coming a long ways. And so we want to make sure that we've got, we don't have a bunch of new guys coming in and doing that game. But, for the other games, if it's, then yes, it should work that way because you got to get those guys, they've got to get the experience. And to your point of seeing different levels of lacrosse, that's the whole point. The whole point is to make them better, so that we have a deeper bench of quality officials and they enjoy it more too. So, I mean, it all goes hand in hand of making things better for everybody.
And the complaint that comes back to me as well. We don't want the 3 best guys working working at a game that doesn't really have any consequence. We certainly wouldn't want the guys that have poor ratings working a Rice CC game. I'm not stupid. I get that premise, right?
Right.
But that doesn't mean once in a while. And if you work through it and you can make those opportunities because there's enough schools in the area. And listen, as a referee, we used to do city games at 3:30 for football and then go out in the suburbs for a 7:00 night game. One year the public school league decided to move the starts to 4:00. Well, you couldn't get from a 4:00 start to a 7 o'clock start. So all of a sudden, for 2 weeks, they didn't have any officials because we all worked the suburbs. We wanted to work the city because it's great football.
Sure.
You got to put us in a position to be able to, and we would drive from wherever. And I would have a game I live in Auburn Hills. I'd have a game at King and a 7 o'clock game in Monroe.
Yep.
I never bitched about where I had to go.
Or gas.
And
Yeah.
we'd make sure that how to get the back roads. Talk to any official before there was GPS and Thomas maps like they used to be in California. We knew every back road possible because you had to get across town as quick as you could.
Yeah.
They missed the manipulation of making it fair and what it would be like for a brand new guy. I'm going to say brand new, but let's say a 1 or 2 year guy to work with a Dana or a Bowery or somebody else to get that experience.
Right.
From spring break, we had 3 guys listed to do our game against Brighton. All of a sudden, I walk on the field, and there's Brian Effinger and there's a couple of more guys, and then one of the guys was another Big Ten official. And I said, guys, you better, if you open your mouths, I'm going to shut you up because these are 2 of the best officials in the state. I think
Right.
there's 3 penalties called. And the kids got in the locker room at the end of the game. They went, "Oh my God, there is a difference." And if we're going to grow the sport, you want to grow officials. That's one of the ways to do it because all of a sudden the kids are looking at going, "This is what's possible when you look at good officials."
Right. Yeah.
And there are more good ones than average ones. I believe that to be true.
Yeah.
And none of them are doing it for the money. They're not. I'm telling you, I'd spent a lot of years as an official, and nobody ever came in a locker room for a pregame and went, "Well, Team X we got to even it up because he had an argument with me 2 weeks ago."
Right.
It just doesn't exist.
No,
I've had bad games as an official. I don't.
I mean, everybody. Yeah. I mean, it's going to happen. But I mean, nobody's doing it just for the money. Exactly right. And even my daughter plays for Mercy, and we had a game yesterday, and she's one of the captains, so she was out there, and one of the officials on the women's side, was like, "Hey, any seniors?" And she's like, "Yeah," and the official said, "You should sign up to become a referee." And she told me, I'm like, "Yeah, you should." And so the point is that the training needs to be structured, right? You need to have that confidence that I'm doing a good job, and that to do a game like that with a Bowery and some of the other veterans in the sport is just going to help them. It's going to make it easier for them to sign up because you're going to be trained because you've got the parent situation that has been bad, and this year hasn't been so bad at the games that I've been at, but we know how that goes, and it's just apprehension for newer officials to sign up because A, you've got to learn it, B, you don't know if you're going to get trained, and C, you've got to take a lot of outside things that could happen to you that makes people uncomfortable.
Frank Martin, the great South Carolina basketball coach, has a YouTube vignette. Somebody asked him during a press conference.
Yeah.
And the gist of it, and I'll paraphrase it, but the gist of it, he says, "What do you think guys working a Saturday or Sunday morning game for $20 a game?" He says, "Do you really think they get up with the idea that we're going to really run this team over?" He says they're making $20, maybe $40 for a couple of games to feed their families or maybe play a round of golf. He says, "Do you really honestly think they care?" And I think that's part of it. But part of it also goes back to I see the same face when I walk on my field. He happens to live in town. Think of the protocols that they have at the collegiate level. If you're a Michigan State graduate, you don't work Michigan State.
Right.
And if you work a Michigan graduate, you never work a Michigan game, so on and so forth, because there's just too much at stake. And I understand there's not betting on high school sports, and I understand all the ramifications, but I'd like to see the state. I'd like to see Mich Lowa take a look at more of a regional assignment premise. They're not going to listen to me, but I threw it out because I think it makes sense, and I think it's something that they could at least look at to make things
I
a
agree.
little bit easier.
And I think the MHSAA getting involved too. I mean, I think you need kind of that overriding person to put it together and say, listen, we're going to have some continuity here, and like you mentioned, bringing them all under the same kind of umbrella in terms of a pay scale. It just makes things easier so that this doesn't happen again. And so, you think about what is going on, and maybe it's happened for a reason. Maybe it's just not about the money. Maybe it is an opportunity to do what we're talking about, what you're talking about, the structure to hit the reset button so that we don't run into this, 5 years down the road.
I'm not going to even voice my thoughts on the MHSA's idea and how they handle referees associations. I know a lot of the discussion when they sort of let the associations take care of business had a lot to do with lawsuits as it related to employees, even though they were independent contractors.
Right.
When they got involved in situations, they would always find themselves as an accessory as part of a lawsuit. I'm sure it was nuisance more than it was anything else.
Yeah.
And you really can't have referees in a situation where they're connected. I understand that premise, but that doesn't mean you can't have a little stronger structure.
Sure.
10 years ago, you'd have guys having to pay a signer to get a game and having to go to their camp. And there's always been manipulation is the word I'll use with the referees and across the board. And the signers do a really good job of making sure a lot of that stuff isn't like it used to be.
Mhm.
But there's got to be some directive from the MHSAA.
Structures.
At least give them the structure because
And they can remain arm's length, right, to avoid some of those things. So yeah, I'm hopeful. And so hopefully this will set things straight and we can move forward. I mean, heck, the season's, it goes so fast coming out of spring break. I mean, it's almost done, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you look at the calendar and the regular season is going to be done in a month.
Yeah, it comes and goes and it is what it is. So, John, we should be happy that we're going to have finals at the University of Michigan.
Heck yeah.
Can I say that as a Spartan? So that's a really good thing.
100%. I'm going to get a tent. I may be in the parking lot. I may run a Winnebago and just sit out there in the parking lot on Friday and Saturday.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, appreciate it. We'll pick up next time in the next show next week and
Always.
have a good one. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Hopefully that was good insight from John and I. We look forward to the finals being conducted at the University of Michigan's Lacrosse Stadium. And hopefully we're going to try and get Cole Malatinsky, who is the MHSAA's lacrosse representative, maybe to talk to us a little bit about, this is a 1 year. We've heard a number of things about maybe being a multi-year contract. So we'll get him on hopefully next week and maybe kind of explain a little better. But what a great move by the MHSAA for our sport. And we look forward to having a great finals at down in Ann Arbor. Up next, Bellarmine head coach Andrew Whitley. We'll be back in a second.
Welcome back to Titan Preview. We're getting a chance to talk to Andrew Whitley, the great coach at Bellarmine. University of Detroit Mercy will head Saturday to Kentucky to play another ASUN game. A bit of a tough weekend. You guys had a great win over Robert Morris, 14-9. Great season. And Andrew, you're going to entertain University of Detroit. Where do you talk a little bit about the game, but also talk about the league? Because right now you're at, I think, 5-2 in the league overall, if I'm not mistaken.
We are. I think we still have a little bit of a miracle has to happen. We could still get the 2 seed, but I think we're probably settling into kind of the 3-4 spot, depending on kind of the outcome the last couple weeks. We've had a couple of pretty good. We're a couple of plays away, I think, from potentially being in one of the driver's seat for one of those top 2 seeds, but. I'm pretty happy with the progression this week. We won a couple of big ones against Robert Morris and Cleveland State this week. So I was just pretty happy with, be able to get 2 teams that we've, are kind of big rivals in the Rust Belt, and Robert Morris we hadn't beaten since 2016. And Cleveland State was just a good one to get. It was kind of an emotional Saturday. One of our captains, Denton McDonald, had his mom pass from a long-term battle with cancer on Friday. So it was a pretty emotional Saturday for the guys and for our locker room. And we were able to, Cleveland State came out playing great, and we were able to kind of weather the storm and ultimately come back and get one on Saturday, and kind of head into Detroit here in a pretty good spot, having also qualified, kind of knowing we're going to be in the conference tournament.
You took over during the pandemic year, and a lot of the kids you have on the roster now were freshmen then, they're seniors now. You could put up 11 last year. Certainly nobody's looking over their shoulder when they're playing you. And that takes a different premise. I would think that sort of, as you pointed out in the pre-interview, managing success has been a part of that process for you as a coaching staff. What are the kind of things you talked about with your players when you know that you've had that success last year, and obviously you're continuing into 2024?
Well, we have a mental performance woman who works in our department, and we've just kind of attacked it head on. Success begets pressure, and so we've really kind of tried to embrace that pressure. One of the things I tell the kids all the time is pressure is a privilege. Most people spend their life in the audience. You guys get to be on stage for a little while. Enjoy that and appreciate it and embrace it. But it does come with pressure, and we kind of addressed that at the beginning of the fall. And it's been something we've talked about regularly. Just expectations, whether they're internal within the kids themselves, or whether they're external because there's some media coverage, there's some expectations from outside influences. We've just talked about it very openly. We've also started to realize we're not getting anybody's C+ effort anymore. We're looking back, teams look at a team that won 11 games last year. I don't really care that historically we haven't had that previously, but we won 11 games last year, so people got us circled on their calendar. And we've gotten a lot of A and B effort out of people, including some of the high major teams we've played. So we've handled that pretty well, I think, this year. There's been a couple of bumps along the way, but I think it's something that we're going to have to get used to if this continues to progress the way we hope it does.
As a goaltender, do you think you understand pressure better than maybe offensive or defensive players? I say that as being a former goaltender in college.
I like to think so, but at the end of the day, I think it actually is just I look at the game a little bit from a different perspective. Guys that are played in the field, talk a lot about X's and O's and strategy, and I ultimately look at goaltending as an individual position in a team sport. And in lacrosse, we even put a circle around it, so you kind of live in a little bit of a bubble at times. But one of the things I talk with our goalies about is once the ball's in the air, whether a guy's at 18 yards or at 18 inches, there's only one guy on the field that can do something about it. And so there's a little bit of, you get too much blame when it goes poorly and get too much credit when it goes well. And so we talk about that. And a lot of what our defensive scheme is about is we're not going to play shotless defense. That is unrealistic in college lacrosse. And you have to be able to ultimately give up shots that your goalies are comfortable saving, and then they've got to save it. And so a lot of what we do schematically is built around that. I give my associate head coach, Nick Marks, a ton of credit. We have, he's done a really good job turning us from a very average defensive team when I arrived to ultimately helping recruit those guys and turning us into what I think is a quite good defensive unit right now. And we currently rank in the top 3 in clearing percentage, which I think is part of that. That's kind of good stick handlers, guys who are comfortable in space, guys who play very well in a scheme. And that's been a staple. When I took the job, for us to be able to win games, we had to be in them. So I kind of started defensively and worked up, and it's just allowed us to be in games the first couple of years. And then, year 3 and 4, we started to win a couple of them. And that's just been part of the evolution. When I took the job 5 years ago, I ultimately was thinking about building things that were sustainable. I didn't want to take a lot of shortcuts. I'd rather take 25 steps that I knew we could repeat than take 5 that might give us a flashpoint, but we might not be able to do again.
When you look at as a goaltender, are you when you lay it? I've asked this question of a lot of coaches. When you're laying in bed at night, are you an offensive guy or defensive guy?
At
Honestly,
the
in
end
your
of the
heart.
day, I'm a goalie.
Okay.
Because I think it all comes down to generating shots on offense. And do you have personnel that can do that? And do you have players that can make shots? And defensively, it's about contesting shots, and being able to put guys in position where they give up certain kind of shots. But at the end of the day, how does it all apply to getting the ball in the goal or keeping the ball out of the goal? We look at guys who will take a shot, it's contested and miss the cage as very, very effective defense. So I don't mean to dodge your question, but
No, no.
I kind of look at it from both perspectives, and I look at it as if I think about it as if I am standing in the crease, because I picked up lacrosse in 8th grade and I was a goalie from the get-go. And so I've always, that's been my foundational perspective. And I'm one of the few guys in college lacrosse that at various points in their career have coached both the offensive side and the defensive side. That's just kind of where the journey has led me. So, but it's always been back to either how do we defend shots or how do we create shots? Because at the end of the day, it's a player's game. To use an old NBA adage, it's a make or miss league. It's college lacrosse is a little bit of that too. If you're going to generate shots, do you make them or you don't? And the Utah game was a great reference point for us. I felt like we generated the same type of shots and gave up the same type of shots throughout the 60 minutes. The first half, we got a big lead going because we made those shots. In the second half, Utah was able to come back and make some plays because they made their shots and we didn't. And it was kind of a tale of two halves. And at the end of the day, we had a chance 13-13 with 2 minutes to go on the ball. And we didn't make our shot. They made theirs. And that ended up being the difference in the game. But that is ultimately how I kind of view the whole process.
I asked the question because I was a box kid growing up, and I had a really good goaltender in front of me, especially in junior A. So I was asked if I could play the crease. So I ended up learning to play the crease because I was a bigger football kind of body, and I could always catch and pass. So it was always that development of I don't think you can put anybody in the goal. I think it takes a very special person to play goalie, and I think it's not the right field of baseball. And I think you probably would agree as a former goaltender. And I think
I
sometimes
think goalies are the best athletes on the field nowadays. It used to be the unathletic, immovable kid that I think in
right,
the early days of lacrosse people would put in there because he didn't have to run.
right.
People realized that you have to be athletic to play that position. It's a different type of athleticism than it is the guys that are in the field, but it's no less athletic. And if you look at college lacrosse now and look at who the best goalies are, they're all extraordinary athletes. They're different than the guys running up and down the field, but Liam Entenmann is an exceptional athlete. Will Mark is an exceptional athlete. That's just, you can't be athletic and you can't not be athletic and play the position anymore. It's too fast. The ball moves too quickly. You're required to be too, explosive to make saves that it's just impossible to be in that position and not be athletic.
But halfway through the third quarter yesterday, the Air Force, the University of Detroit Mercy game, their 5'8" goalie took off, being chased by a couple of relatively fast attacks. And this kid just ran away from him and got down. And obviously it was a human clear for what it was, but it was fun to watch. One of the things that you guys do really well, you took over during the pandemic. You guys have as good a staff for developing players. You don't necessarily always looking for battleships. You're fighting for those kids behind a rock who might turn out to be great, good high school players, but not necessarily great high school players. And your staff's done a really good job of developing the talent. And kids that come there are certainly better players, in year 3 and 4 than they might have been as freshmen. What's the secret to that?
We spend a lot of time in the weight room. There's no doubt about that. But a lot of the recruiting process is you recruit personality. I stole this moniker from Chris Peterson, the old Washington football coach, but he always talked about when he was out there that he recruited OKGs, and it's an acronym for our kind of guys. Um, I think there's a lot of Division I lacrosse players out there in the United States right now. I graduated from college in 1996. There were like 68 Division I teams. They're currently 77 right now. There are 2.5 times as many high school players for what is effectively the same number of roster spots. So there's a lot of guys that are really good lacrosse players. Um, but we're not trying to build an all-star team. We're actually trying to build a team. So we recruit guys to fit roles, and then a lot of before we say yes to guys is, do we think they'll fit in our locker room? When I recruit and evaluate guys, and my staff does the same thing, we ultimately look, are they a Division I talent band player? But then we don't split hairs in is he at the top of the band? Is he the middle of the band? Is he at the bottom of the band? I've just kind of committed at this point in my life to coaching kids I like. We spend 3 and 4 hours a day around the kids. I will trade 3, 4, 5, 8, even 10% of talent at the high school level for being around kids I like. Because at the end of the day, when our staff works with them and they are very good developers of talent and very patient teachers, over the course of 3, 4, and even 5 years, we're going to influence the situation. And I recognize that we are going to be hard on kids, and I'm not always going to be at the top of everybody's Christmas card list. But I think if we are on the same page, a lot of times we end up getting the best version of whatever that player is capable of. And that's more important to us than it is kind of getting the complete project. Now, we do try to recruit battleships, but those kids have a lot of different options, and we're still in an evolving program. And I think eventually what I'm hoping is, as we continue to have success and we're able to ultimately kind of hopefully get into the NCAA tournament and make some noise there. We can, especially in the Midwest and the South, we can maybe get some of those elite players who choose Bellarmine over an Ohio State or Michigan, the same way kids on the East Coast will choose Loyola over Maryland. They're making a conscious choice on their academic experience and their collegiate experience while still playing a very high level of lacrosse. And that is the long-term 8-10 year vision. But that's also good for us, because if we get a guy who's a 4-star player and we can continue to work with him and turn him into a 5-star player, we got a pretty special ball player. And had that happen, I mean, John Robbins was a 4th-round pick in the PLL, and I think he's a 2-3 year very stable pro. We've got a couple guys in Benny O'Rourke and Kyle Playstead and Denton McDonald that I think are going to be on people's radar screen for both the NLL Indoor League and also the PLL draft. I think those guys can fit very well in that league and right spots. They also are much like John. They're workers, and John turned himself from a borderline PLL player into a staple PLL player, and it's through work. And a lot of it is evaluating families and evaluating the kids, dynamic, and evaluating their work ethic. And if we get it right, we can ultimately turn those guys into something, because they are on the same wavelength we are.
The sport, briefly, seems like the college sport seems like it's getting faster. It's not necessarily getting bigger. Nicky Polanco's you don't see those guys anymore. You see guys that can move the ball, and which opens up certainly the sport for smaller guys with talent and stick talent. Why have we gone faster? I don't want to say we've gone smaller. I see Jacksonville, then I turn around and watch the 6'4" midfielders from Air Force. That's a whole nother, and they're as fast as the guys that are 5'10". So it's obviously speed and size win everything, but we have gotten faster. Why do you think that's the case?
I think it's the shot clock, to be frank. The reality is you get 20 seconds to clear it, you get it over. If you try to sub personnel, you're going to take 10, 15 seconds to do that. So you're only getting 45 to 50 seconds of settled offense. There's some extraordinary talented players out there, and they tend to gravitate towards the attack. And because defenses are so organized and so well coached, and goalies are so much better than they used to be, that if you allow pretty much any team in the country a chance to get set up defensively, I don't care if they're in the RPI 50s, they're going to be hard to score on. So where the differentiator is get guys in space, eliminate one of the guys because you're in transition and he's trailing the play. So those 5-on-5 and 4-on-4 situations become, where the defense is a little bit jumbled and a little bit less organized, become critical for you being able to score goals. Because goalies are on the move, so they're not set. There's more space for your talented guys to work in, and you're able to generate the shots that you're looking for a little bit more easily. But it does require speed, because if you wait too long, then the defenses get in, then they get organized, then they get set up, and now it gets really hard to score again. If you're trying to get to 13, 14 goals, you're going to get a couple of man up goals. You're probably going to get 6-on-6 goals. That leaves you, if you're going to get there, you're going to need to get 5, 6, 7 transition goals, which means you're going to have to play quicker to create those opportunities. And when they materialize, you're going to need to take advantage of them, because if you get more than 15, 20 seconds into the possession, they're usually gone.
Personal question in the interview, and I found it interesting that you were actually in the building business for a while out of college. So coaching came a later decision, which is I think it's a fair question. What transition between being the player, obviously going into business for a while, and coming back out because you were volunteer assistant for a little while? Just kind of walk us through that, because I think it's really interesting.
Well, I interned with a guy who ultimately gave me an opportunity at a sports agency. He was a certified player agent. And so he offered me a portion of the company because he couldn't kind of match some of the salaries I was getting out of college. And I, at 22, 23, was like, you know what, if this goes south 2, 3 years from now, and somebody's been like, what have you been doing the last 3 years? And I tell them I didn't feel like that would age poorly. My parents were on board with it because they certainly subsidized it a little bit, in terms of, because I was not making a lot of money out of the gate, so I needed a little bit of help.
Right.
And we ended up being a boutique agency. We ended up selling that, got into the commodity trading, futures commodity trading business. And we also got into residential and commercial real estate, where we would rehabilitate kind of dilapidated properties and resell them. That all started kind of 2000, 2001. And so, between 2001 and 2008, that was a quite good time to be in real estate. And so, 2007, I was coaching at the high school level, where I went to high school because I couldn't quite let it go. First 4 years out of college, I coached at Wesleyan. My business started to take off, so I couldn't do that anymore. It worked out that my high school coach in New Haven, I could go there, blow a whistle, be at practice, and stayed in it. But then Yale, he is a Yale alum, was a Yale alum, and Andy Shea was looking for a goalie coach at the time, and we had reached the end of a project. So I kind of was like, I want to see what it's like. In 2007, I was there at Yale as the volunteer. I had a little bit of a freak accident at practice, where I got hit in the face with a lacrosse ball in the fall of 2007. and I missed like a month of work. And the only thing I really wanted to do was actually coach lacrosse. That was the thing I missed the most. So I went to my business partner. We were kind of getting towards the end of the project that we were working on anyway. And I said, listen, I think I want to give this college lacrosse thing a shot. So we took the 2008 season to kind of divest ourselves of our business holdings. It was a very amicable departure. We shook hands and went on our separate ways. And I was like, I'm going to give myself 5 years to see what this thing looks like. I spent another year at Yale. I had a chance to coach to move over to Fairfield because I got a little bit more responsibility from Andy Copeland. Spent 3 additional years there as the volunteer. Got hired full time in 2013 for the 2013 season, and then ultimately the associate head coach in 2015, and became got the head coaching job here at Bellarmine in the fall of 2019. So ultimately became the managing partner of that investment company. And I was in it for 12 years. I liked it for 10.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm going to give myself 5 years to see if I'm happy in this coaching thing. And that was, so it was 2008. So that was 16 years ago now.
I ask because most of the guys coaching at the Division I level would probably end up being teachers in their background. A good portion of them. What is the business opportunities you had help you with? What have you learned from that from a coaching perspective?
Well, it's funny. I would love to coach more lacrosse as the head coach here. But it is, being the head coach at a Division I program is ultimately has a lot of CEO similarities to it. We have budget responsibilities, we have compliance responsibilities, we have scholarship management responsibilities, we have recruiting responsibilities. Kind of personnel is a big part of it. Those are kind of the 4 things that ultimately give you a foundation for success. And then you can kind of put your pieces in place. And so I've been fortunate enough to have a staff that is extraordinary at taking really good pieces and turning them into a very successful, cohesive unit. But the business side of it's been very effective in terms of budget planning, in terms of, as an entrepreneur, there's a certain degree of risk. Bellarmine has, we are all in on lacrosse, but we don't have the operating budget of an Ohio State or a Michigan or a Duke, but we are required to compete with those teams. We've made the decision to put them on our schedule, and they ain't going to feel bad for us because they got a budgetary advantage.
Understand.
So it just kind of maximizing resources, being efficient, while still maintaining a program that functions within the university mission and is also continuing to try and grow. Those are all things that were very applicable in the business world and have been very translatable to program building. The lacrosse piece is the best part of the day for me. We try to make it the best part of the day for our players because at the end of the day, it is a game, much as our livelihood is derived from it. I do actually try to keep some perspective and realize that, we are not curing a disease. We are ultimately, kind of developing the ideology of young men and ultimately trying to, it is a game, and at the end of the day, the sun's going to rise tomorrow and we want to try to compete and be the best versions of ourselves, but we are also ambassadors and representatives of the university, and the school very much uses us as a front porch to the institution on a national level. We are a regional school with a national footprint, and that is very much the university mission.
Absolute last question. Give us your version or give us your vision of where does Michigan fit in the Midwest as far as lacrosse recruiting goes?
I think it's one of those burgeoning states. The reality is each Midwestern state, the top guys are not only just top guys within the region, they're becoming top guys nationally. And that's applicable for, Michigan, Ohio, Illinois. Those are all things that are the top guys are impactful Division I players. The kid who is at Michigan now, Bo Lockwood, was a top 100 player in high school. He should have been a top 100 player in high school. He was an extraordinarily good player. We have a kid from Brother Rice, Robert McMichael, who was tasked with covering him in the state championship game. And the fact that he held his own and belonged on the field against him, that was a reason that we thought he was going to be a really good college player. It's turned out to be something that's been pretty good for us. He's been a pretty significant contributor for us as a freshman. And so I think it's just a matter of finding, you don't really recruit regionally, you recruit guys that can impact your program. And so we've kind of set about a national recruiting process. And Michigan is one of those states that we got circled every single year. We do try to get 2 or 3 guys, every year that we target within the state of Michigan that we think can impact our program. We have a kid in in goal next year named Nolan Hudnut, who's a Michigan kid. He was a Juice Cherries club kid, and he's coming next year. He's got a chance to be a pretty good ball player for us. We're pretty excited about him. But that's he's going to be challenged because we're starting a freshman right now, and Jack Bryant's been pretty good for us. So it's just creating a competitive environment. There's some really good athletes. The kids that I think ultimately used to go kind of Division II, Division I AA football and basketball route, those kids are starting to lean towards lacrosse. They just aren't kind of following the football route the way they used to. And so I think we're starting to get better and better athletes. So the guys that, the elite athletes, they kind of go where they go. But the next tier of guys don't quite, I think are looking for some better options because they want to be at the top of the food chain.
Club teams here were really strong for a long time. And then with the advent of NAIA teams, a lot of those kids got out of places where they could go play lacrosse at, University X, drink beer on the weekends. Now they're going to an NAIA program that's very much structured like any Division III school. And I think that changes the landscape. So more kids are playing at a higher level. The club teams have suffered, but I think it's overall, I think the kids are working towards degrees as well as playing lacrosse. I think it's a good thing. The Titans head to Kentucky coming up this coming Saturday, playing what is one of the better teams in the country right now. We wish you the best of luck, and Andrew, I appreciate you taking some time to talk to us.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks, Greg.
Just wanted to take the time to hopefully you smile from the bloopers. We had a good conversation with John Losey, as always. And we wanted to thank Andrew Whitley for spending some time with us. I think you're going to find out that the Bellarmine program is one of those up-and-comers. And we hope get a chance to spend some time watching that game this week on ESPN3. So for all the guys in back, we appreciate you coming aboard. And for all the guys that are involved in lacrosse, my name is Greg Norman, your host. We'll see you next time.